They sent word to Judah to gather. 3 days only, the king said. Bring the men, bring the standards, bring the steel. The order went not to Joab. David had demoted him after Absalom died hanging in a tree, but to Amasa, the very cousin Joab hated. The court whispered. The old general watched. He had seen kings change their minds before. He had helped them. But this time, the order stood. Amasa would command Judah. Joab would stand aside. It was supposed to be routine. Muster the troops, meet the king's deadline, and march north to stop a new fire. Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjaminite with a trumpet, and the kind of voice that makes tired men climb to their feet. "We have no share in David," Sheba had shouted. "Every man to his tents." The kingdom, already sore from civil war, split again. David felt the wound opening and bled urgency. "Amasa," he said, "be back in 3 days." Amasa missed the deadline. Whether the town stalled him or the men hesitated to follow a commander fresh from the other side, Scripture does not say. It says only that time evaporated and the king grew afraid. He turned, not to Amasa now, but to Abishai, Joab's brother. "Sheba will do us more harm than Absalom," David said. "Take the servants and pursue him." Joab, still a soldier even when he had been told he was no longer in charge, marched beside his brother as if the demotion had never happened. North they went, past the hills where old battles had left ghosts in the scrub, until they came to the great stone at Gibeon. It was a good place for a meeting, elevated, visible, a landmark everyone knew. Dust rose along the road. Amasa's column crested into view, late and tired. He dismounted, trusting that his new title still had weight. He saw men he'd fought against only weeks earlier and offered them peace with his open hands. Joab came forward in an officer's coat, his belt tight and his tunic falling just so, the way he always wore it when he meant to be obeyed. At his side hung a short sword. The text says it fell out as he stepped, a casual drop like a tool slipping from a hook. No one moved. Joab scooped it up. In one motion, he stood before Amasa, with soldier's warmth in his voice. "Are you well, my brother?" he asked, and with his right hand he took Amasa's beard to draw him close for a kiss. It is a gesture as old as trust. A hand in the beard, a greeting on the mouth, a peace that says we are kin, you and I. Amasa did not watch the other hand. Joab's left held the blade. He moved like water bending around a stone. He drove the steel into Amasa's belly, low and deliberate, a butcher's knowledge at a soldier's speed. The scripture is plain. His entrails poured out on the ground. He did not need a second strike. Joab stepped back before the blood reached his sandals. For a heartbeat the road did nothing. Then men shouted and scattered until the discipline in them closed rank against the panic. Amasa clutched at himself, red soaking his tunic, eyes wider than any apology could fill. He sank into the dust. He was still alive, the text says, wallowing in blood. The old general did not linger. Joab left the wounded man in the road and returned to command as if a seal had been broken and the ink had dried in an instant. One of Joab's young men stood beside the body and called to the troops. "Whoever favors Joab, and whoever is for David, follow Joab." It was instruction and absolution combined. The army looked at the dying commander, then at the road north where the rebel was running. Loyalty wanted a clean path. The sight of Amasa twisting and staining the ground made feet slow. So they dragged him aside and threw a cloak over him while he gasped, out of the way, like a broken cartwheel. When he stopped moving, they covered him better. The column flowed again. This is how a murder turns into a policy. The pursuit resumed. Sheba fled toward the far north, to Abel Beth-Makkah, a wise town, a careful town near the border, where news came wrapped in caution and people weighed words before spending them. Joab surrounded the place and built up a ramp to batter the wall. The sound of it carried into courtyards where women kneaded bread and old men sipped water against the heat. Inside, Sheba leaned on the safety of other people's stones. Outside, Joab watched the siege machine climb and thought in straight lines. Cut down the wall, take the head, end the story before the king asks too many questions about Gibeon. A woman's voice came from the parapet, not shrill and not afraid. The text calls her a wise woman. She asked to speak with Joab, and the army paused because armies always pause when wisdom sounds like order. She made her argument clean. Are you the kind of man who devours a mother city in Israel? Will you swallow an inheritance of the Lord over one guilty fugitive? Joab answered with the bluntness of a soldier. Far be it from me, he said. He named Sheba as the only object. Give him up, he promised, and the city would be spared. The woman did not become a go-between. She became a leader. She spoke to the people inside, and they listened. They knew the arithmetic of survival. A traitor had come to them. A kingdom was at their gate. The story ends with an efficient sentence. They cut off Sheba's head and threw it to Joab. He blew the retreat, took the proof, and went home. The wall stood. The town kept its children. Joab kept his job. In Jerusalem, no court convened for Amasa. There was no panel to sketch the angle of the blade or weigh the greeting hand against the killing hand. The evidence lay in the dust of a roadside and the silence of men whose living depended on marching. David, who had once cursed Joab's violence and demoted him, found his army whole again, under the one commander who would always bring it back in a straight line. The king had a kingdom to hold together. Rage turned to paperwork. Paperwork turned to a blank page. But Scripture refuses to treat the day as accidental. It places the details like markers in a case file. The great stone at Gibeon, the sword that fell and was gathered up, the beard touched in greeting, the surprise in Amasa's eyes, the intestine spilling thrust, the cloak thrown over a man until he moved no more. It tells you who was sent, who was late, who stepped forward to say, "Are you well, my brother?" and who left that brother dying in the road. Names matter in divine crime. Motives matter too. Joab had killed before in the name of stability. Abner by the city gate, Absalom swinging from the oak. Each time he had considered the kingdom, and each time he had considered himself, and each time he had found the same answer. His record did not absolve him. It explained him. Joab loved order more than he loved innocence. He believed the state was fragile and that friendships, even royal ones, could not be allowed to weaken command. When Amasa took his title, Joab took his life. When Sheba took a town, Joab took his head. Biblical justice would later close on Joab in its own time and way. But on this day, his logic ruled the ground, and men followed it because it worked. Armies do that. Nations do too. What do you do with a murder that saves a city? What do you say about a kiss that hides a blade while a trumpet of rebellion is still echoing across the hills? The text leaves you at that crossroads, the dust still hanging where men ran to close the siege, and a single figure lying under a cloak at the edge of the road. The command moved on without him. The kingdom breathed. The ledger added a quiet line in Joab's column, not sanctioned, not punished, carried forward to another page. And so the case of Amasa reads like a roadside confession, with no court to accept it. Evidence was abundant. Witnesses were many. The suspect walked away in uniform and returned to work. The body stayed where it fell until the army agreed not to look. What remained was the memory of a greeting that turned into a wound so clean it needed no second cut, and the warning that in the heat of crisis, some leaders will do anything to make a problem disappear. Not all killers run. Some command the pursuit. Thank you for listening to Divine Crime. Subscribe for more true stories from the most dangerous book ever written.